The paranormal is an experience that will make us believe, that will make us tell stories that the rest of our friends will not believe. It is closer to us than we usually think. Every day, and especially every night, we risk seeing something we should not have seen. Feeling something that would have gone unnoticed before. Whether it's a road trip, walking home, on the subway, or public transport when we're coming back to rest. Perhaps there, in our own home, in the bathroom, in our bedroom. Wherever you are listening right now, remember, you are not safe. And listening to ghost stories always makes these energies much, much closer to you than to a normal person. It's not to scare you. We are simply preparing you for reality, to be the protagonists of a story. We hope you enjoy the stories in this collection, as they are some of the most terrifying ones we have received recently. That is why they have been selected for you. Turn off the light, get comfortable, and let yourself go. You are already entering the following tales of the night. I'm going to tell you a story that I think is extremely mysterious. I wouldn't even dare to classify it in any way, but I'm sure it goes beyond our understanding. Mine at least, of course. My dad died on January 22nd, 2016. Although a lot of time has passed, I miss him like the first day he wasn't here. I always have him present, but in a healthy way. I don't cry anymore. Sadness doesn't break me anymore. I value everything we were able to live through together. A few weeks ago, in early January of this 2024, the house phone rang. It even scared me because no one has used it to call us for years. We just have it because my mom doesn't want the number to be lost forever or for it to be given to someone else. I answered, being sure it would be a salesperson or some kind of scam attempt. Hello? Hello, son? The voice on the other end of the line was my dad's. Who's speaking? What do you mean, who's speaking? Hey, I'm on my way home. I'm going to bring you something. I didn't know what to answer. Be ready. I'm on my way. I'll be there in half an hour. What had just happened? I thought. I was completely in shock. I didn't know what to do. And to top it off, I was alone in the house. My mom had left early, and I had no idea where she was. I looked at my watch and started counting half an hour. My dad was going to arrive. He was going to come back. I sat on an armchair we have that faces the front door of the house. When the half hour was about to be up, the gate to the street opened. I heard someone approaching through the patio up to the house door, as if looking for their keys, and then opened it. The one who came in was my mom, to be surprised by my face completely full of panic, full of tears. I ran to hug her. I told her what had happened, the call I had received. She hugged me, sure that it had just been my imagination, that I had simply missed him suddenly. She told me to take a nap, to rest. And that's what I did. I tried to do it. I went to lie down, even though it was 7 p.m. At 11 p.m., I heard my mom come into my room. She woke me up quite nervous. She had something to tell me, something she had just remembered. Son, do you remember an afternoon before your father died? Remember, please, just the afternoon before that day? I couldn't remember, but my mom told me something that completely unlocked that memory. Your dad came with a roasted chicken from that place you liked. Then I remembered. It was curious, because that day, my mom had arrived a few minutes earlier, also with a chicken from there for dinner. The strange thing was, when my mom asked my dad why he hadn't told us he was going to bring that, my dad said something that had never mattered to us, until now. He said he had called me to let me know, to ask if we were waiting for him, but that I had responded strangely, that I had asked who was speaking. My mom made fun of my dad, telling him he must have dialed the wrong number, but my dad insisted that no. But that call he was talking about never happened. My dad hadn't called me that afternoon, but I feel that everything indicates that call came to me 8 years later, and I have no idea how to explain it. Good evening, community. After listening to the episode Death is Not Forever, I decided to tell you this experience as many do, to see if any of you have gone through something similar, to not feel so alone. It happened a few years ago. In my family, it's difficult to have children, so my siblings and I were the only grandchildren, the only nieces and nephews for a long time. My uncles, my mother's brothers, tried for years to have children. One of them, after 10 years, was able with his wife to have twins, and that was an immense joy, a blessing. The family longed to have new members, and finally they were coming. In the case of my aunt, the third sister, the situation was even more difficult. She underwent several treatments. She spent a fortune in that search to get pregnant. After years of trying, and even a failed adoption, she finally became pregnant. It seemed like a miracle. It seemed that blessing was finally coming to her too. The joy spread throughout the close family, as well as those distant relatives who knew of her desire. We couldn't wait for the arrival of a new baby, but unfortunately, my aunt suffered a spontaneous abortion. When they removed the baby, they told her it was a girl. Somehow, that made it even sadder. I was the only granddaughter, the only niece, and we longed for another one. Despite everything, we managed to support her and move on. She focused on her therapy and told us she would wait a while before trying again. Just a while, which kept getting longer. 4 years after that loss, this story begins. One completely normal morning, when I went down to have breakfast to go to school, my mom came up to me very serious and asked if I was okay. She told me that I already knew that if something happened to me, I could always trust to share it with her. I appreciated the words, but I was a bit confused. I asked her why she was telling me that. Why, at that moment?
Last night I got up to get something and I heard you crying. That's the second time in these days that I've heard you. Are you having problems or did someone break your heart? Whatever it is, my girl, you can tell me.
At that moment she fell silent because she heard my brother coming, who was coming down for breakfast. But he overheard what she was telling me, and then came over to us.
Yeah, dude. All night again. You didn't let me sleep. I was even going to call you to tell you to shut up.
Confused, I could only tell them it wasn't me, that I didn't understand what they were telling me, but they didn't believe me. I guess they thought I was embarrassed to have been crying and to have been heard. They really didn't believe me, and maybe that's why everything continued with a certain relative normality. But a few days later, something very strange happened again. While I was at school, my mom called me on the phone. Hello? Mom, what's wrong? Is everything okay? I answered, worried because my mom didn't usually call me at those hours. I thought it would be an emergency.
Why didn't you tell me you were going to invite girls over? You could have told me yesterday, so I could make the cheese potatoes they like so much.
That gave me a slight chill, because I remembered what they had been hearing for days. I told her it wasn't me, that she should remember I was leaving late at 8, and it was only 6 a.m. I was still at school.
No, don't tell me that. Your grandfather and I just arrived. We heard someone laughing in your room and there's no one in the house.
She told me worried, but I tried to calm her down. No, calm down, Mom. Maybe it's the neighbor's granddaughter from behind. Remember, she has visitors these days. Her daughter came. However, that explanation didn't convince me either. I had never heard a laugh or anything coming from the neighbor's house, even when she had visitors. The call undoubtedly gave me a strange feeling because I didn't understand what was happening, but something was going on, that was for sure. That Sunday, my aunts came to visit us. My aunt looked a bit haggard. Her face looked tired, as if she hadn't slept for days. When I greeted her, I asked her if everything was okay, and she didn't answer me until she made sure no one else could hear us.
The truth is that I haven't slept for 2 days. At night, I hear a little girl calling me. She says, "Mom." She cries for me to go to her. I don't know if I'm going crazy for having lost my baby. But why until now, after so long?
With much sorrow for her, without commenting or thinking about what was happening in my house, I simply hugged her, and then we tried to forget about the topic. The next day, my siblings and I stayed home. I remember it was a holiday. My mom went to work since she didn't rest, as she worked at a daycare. My grandparents went out to go to the supermarket to do the shopping where they usually took several hours. I remember I was playing an online video game with my boyfriend at the time, while we chatted via video call. My younger brother was playing on his computer with some friends, and my other brother was in the living room watching a movie. It was around 1 p.m. Everything was quiet until a scream of horror from my brother, the one who was downstairs, made me jump out of my seat. To this day, remembering that scream still makes my hair stand on end. We ran to find him. My brother was crying like a child, his face soaked in tears.
There's a girl jumping on my grandparents' bed. I swear to you, there's a girl jumping on the bed.
I went to see, but there was nothing. Nothing strange, except for a feeling that I couldn't describe to you, even if I wanted to. My grandparents arrived soon after with my mom, because we called everyone to tell them what had happened, that my brother was suddenly not well, and he, now calmer, told us everything. He told us that while he was watching the movie, he heard someone running behind him to enter my grandparents' room, which was on the first floor. Thinking it was my younger brother, who was playing a prank, he went to look for him. But when he peeked into the room, he witnessed a scene that would haunt him from then on. There was a girl in a white dress with long black hair, jumping on the bed while laughing. When he said this, my brother told my mom,
"See? I told you I wasn't crazy, that what I saw the other time was a girl."
There he told the rest of us that days earlier, when he came back in the early morning, after going out with his friends, he saw something peeking out from my mom's room. At first, he thought it was her, but then he saw clearly. It was a girl peeking out the partly open door. My mom just told him he had imagined it, that he was tired from going out and from the flu he had had days before, and surely his body still hadn't recovered. That's when I decided to tell them what my aunt had told me the last time I saw her. So we began to connect the dots between all these situations that were occurring in the family. That day we tried to end it with normality, despite everything. I remember that I was in evaluations, so I had many assignments and exams to do. Normally, I would stay up until late at night doing my homework, since I studied in the afternoon. On that occasion, I stayed up doing homework, and when I finished, I looked at the time to calculate how much time I was going to sleep. It was 2 a.m. Before going to bed, I went to the bathroom, and I was listening to my cat, who was a baby at the time, running and jumping from one side to the other down the hallway until she reached the living room. When I was finally walking down this, I felt like turning towards the living room. Not much could be seen because of the darkness. I could barely make out the silhouettes of the furniture from memory in the back. But there was something else there, something that wasn't in my memory. Something different. There was a girl sitting on the couch, with her back to me. She was playing with my cat. Without saying anything, I just took a deep breath. I went to the bathroom while repeating in my head that it was nothing, that I was imagining it. I was very sleepy and had heard many things that made me feel afraid, and I tried to convince myself that that was it. I didn't sleep at all, and it was impossible for me not to tell my family. Without thinking about it, we all opted to seek help. And although it sounds cliched, at times like these everyone looks for someone who is willing to help you, because not many people are going to do it. It almost always ends up being someone who is dedicated to this, someone known to someone else, someone trustworthy. That's how we found a friend of my grandmother's, with certain gifts, so to speak, who agreed to check our house. She ended up confirming something that I had already sensed. She told us that perhaps that girl we were seeing, who was manifesting, was the one my aunt had lost. Although the church does not validate it, when a baby dies, before being baptized, it can end up wandering. That's why she, the lady, when she was a nurse, and saw that a baby died without being baptized, she would baptize it without anyone noticing, so that they could go to rest in peace. She told us that we should invite my aunts over the following Saturday to perform a ritual. She told me that I would be the one who would have to baptize her because, apparently, she had a fixation on me. We accepted. My aunts accepted, no matter how crazy it sounded, because we all wanted this to end. She shared a prayer with me that I had to learn, and all that was left was to wait for that Saturday. That night, after she visited us, while I was studying the prayer, around 9 p.m., I went to the kitchen for a glass of water before bed. Back then, I had a touch lamp, and when I returned to my room, I realized that the lamp was turning on and off. On and off, over and over again. It seemed like someone was playing with it. To tell you the truth, it wasn't the first time. In fact, even before being aware of the presence of that girl, it would happen that the lamp would turn off. But I always attributed it to an electrical fault. The lamp kept flickering, and I gathered the courage to unplug it. That night I was very afraid. A very intense fear that something was there in the room with me. And I asked my mom to let me sleep with her until Saturday, until the day of the ritual. And that day came. My friend's grandmother, when we gathered, had me stand in the middle, while the rest of the family held hands. They gave me holy water, and I began with the prayer. In the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. With the permission of Almighty God, I baptize you, Maria, so that you may go in peace to eternal rest. I formed a cross on the floor with the water. Then I sprinkled each one with it, while continuing to pray the Our Father. When the ritual ended, my grandmother's friend walked the water through the whole house to finally put an end to any memory that remained of that girl, any trace of her spirit. And the atmosphere changed. It genuinely changed as soon as it ended. It seemed that we had managed to give her soul some peace. That night I stayed up until the early morning studying for a very important exam I had on Monday. It was close to 2 a.m. when I heard someone knock on the door. I thought it was Mom. When I heard a little girl laughing out there. Then some footsteps walking away down the hallway. I opened the door without fear, but I didn't see anyone, and that was the last time that girl was heard or seen in the house. It was perhaps a last manifestation to say goodbye. At least that's what we believe. A few months later, my aunt got pregnant. Although it was high risk, she managed to give birth to a very healthy girl. Everything is going well, but there are still many things we can't explain. You see, my cousin, since she was a baby, even before she could talk, has had a fascination with trying to turn off lamps as if they were touch lamps. Even though we no longer have any like that. Even though she was never in contact with one. And that may be an insignificant detail, but there's something else. My cousin arrived when my little cat was already grown, but she became very close to the baby. That's very strange, because my cat is very antisocial. She doesn't interact or play with anyone except her. One day, when my cousin was about 4 years old, she told us that she loved Kira, my cat, very much. She says that the little cat was also a baby, that she was the only one who played with her. She always says that they have known each other since they were both babies. Now she's 6 years old, and the last thing she did was recently, when, in an activity at kindergarten, she told my aunt, I'm so happy to be your daughter again. Again. We don't know if it's a reincarnation. We don't know where she gets things from, as if she had really been with us before. But so many qualities make us wonder if that girl who appeared in the house, the one who cried and laughed at night, is her. If, in fact, she came back. Thank you for continuing here, community. This last story is very interesting because remember, on more than one occasion, the people here who know more about this than we do have warned us that there are no ghosts that look like children, that they are always something more, if they look like that they can be demons in many cases. However, this story makes us think the opposite. It speaks of a ghost from a very, very different perspective. Which do you think is a more plausible vision in this regard? And now, let's move on to more stories tonight. In my family, we are used to taking a long road trip at least once a year. It's a tradition we try to maintain because it's the only time my dad is with us all the time. A few years ago, on one of these trips, we were going to visit a friend of my father's who had gone back to his hometown, where he had built a small 8-room hotel. He had invited him years ago, but my dad didn't like the idea of traveling on those roads between towns he didn't know. He preferred to always stay on safe and monitored roads. However, at some point, his friend finally convinced him, and with all the precautions possible, we finally left one Monday morning, with the intention of arriving at that town that same day, in the afternoon. The truth is that I liked the road. My sister and I were already looking forward to going to a different place, and we were enjoying the adventure. But as if my dad's fear, his precaution about going to an unknown place, called for a bit of bad luck, an hour away from the place, one of the car's tires blew out completely. Fortunately, we weren't going at high speed, and my dad was able to more or less control the car to end up pulling over and falling into a ditch, into some bushes on the side of the road. But without hitting us too much. We were all okay, but the scare was enough to leave us all pale. The road was completely empty. There was no one to ask for help to get the car out of that ditch, and we couldn't push it. To top it off, there was no phone signal. We would have to wait in the middle of that completely deserted place, surrounded by bushes and trees, which didn't allow us to see if there was anyone or anything lurking around there. But of course, that worry, I think, was only there, in my dad's anxiety. The rest of us trusted that nothing would happen and that at any moment a car could appear that could help us. The minutes passed and passed, but what didn't pass was any other car around there. It was getting close to dark and about 1 kilometer away. There was a hill that seemed to be a good option to go there and check if there was a signal. So my dad headed over there, while my sister and I walked around the car and my mom stayed in it in case someone passed by who could help us. Among the branches, we thought we heard something. I didn't say anything and neither did my sister. But when we heard it again, we could no longer hide it. "Do you hear it like someone's crying?" I asked my sister. She told me yes. I don't know if you've been in this position, but one thing is to hear something that you think may be, luckily, just your imagination, and another is for someone else to confirm it for you. It made me very nervous to think that there might be someone there, something that sounded like a woman or a child crying. We couldn't make it out. The two of us, without saying anything, started walking among the bushes. We tried to get closer to what we were hearing, what was sounding clearer and clearer like a person in need of help. We walked among the trees. Night had already fallen completely. Closer, closer, and closer. The sound of an approaching patrol car made us wake up from that kind of trance and come running back to where my mum was. A patrol car had stopped. We ran towards it gladly. Finally, they could help us. My dad managed to see from the middle of the path towards the hill and was already running back. The officers called for a tow truck because they didn't have chains that could be used to tow the vehicle from where it was. They told us we had been very lucky, that it wasn't a good area to be stranded like that. It was a somewhat dangerous place, although in reality there was no town, not a single house, for many kilometers around. At that moment, I think my sister and I suddenly realized what we had just heard. The two of us turned to look at each other, and we turned pale. There were no houses nearby. One of the officers, a man in his 50s, asked us if we were okay, if we hadn't been hurt in the accident, and we told him no. But we had to confess what we had heard, something we hadn't even told our parents yet. We told him there was someone nearby, that there was someone crying among the trees, someone we couldn't see, but my sister said something I didn't know. First, she said it sounded like a woman, and that she reached the place where it was heard, behind a tree. But there was no one there. She heard her crying there, in front of her, but there was no one. The officer, without changing his expression, asked us exactly where we had heard it, and my sister pointed it out to him. Then he went to his patrol car. Shortly after, a police tow truck arrived that helped us get out. We changed the tire and continued on our way back to my father's friend's hotel. That trip was very strange, the rest especially. No matter how much the man tried to make us feel at home, and also that we had the hotel to ourselves, despite everything, we couldn't stop feeling like we were in danger. It wasn't just my dad's anxiety, which was always there. Now it was all of us. On Wednesday morning, while we were having breakfast, my dad asked us if we wanted to head back early, and before my sister and I could say yes. My mom asked him please if we would. No one had mentioned anything, but we all felt that way. My dad made up an excuse to his friend, and very early, we were already setting out on our way back. We didn't want the afternoon to catch us, in those areas where the accident had occurred on the way there. When we passed through that place, it was full of patrol cars, and there was also a forensic medical service van. We didn't want to look and we kept going. However, among the officers, we thought we recognized the ones who had helped us. My sister and I were left with some curiosity, and we told my dad to ask his friend what had happened, but nothing had come out in the news yet. It was not until a few days later that the news became public in the town, and my father's friend sent him a message to tell him that police activity was because they found a body. The body of a person who had gone missing months before, a woman who had been searched for everywhere. They found her buried just below the surface, covered by a pile of leaf litter. My sister recognized the place when my dad told us about that message. My sister told me she had been standing there, in front of that pile of dry leaves, under a tree. That was as far as she went, following that crying sound. It was there that she heard it right in front of her. For the sake of their mental health, we have never told our parents about that part, much less my dad.